everybody, welcome back to our Psychic Sisters channel. I'm Kris, and I'm here today again with my sister Kim.
Hello, everyone.
Kim's from Intuitiview. I'm from Clairvoyant Kris on YouTube. But we also have the Psychic Sister channel where we talk about different sort of spiritual topics. And today we have a topic that was actually suggested by our other sister, Pam. And she wanted to know if we would spend a little time talking about free will, the concept of free will. I think especially when we feel like right now in this time period, where like so much stuff is being done to us.
Right.
So does that take our free will away? You know, how does free will even work? And then there's also this idea sort of destiny or predestination. When we start talking about reincarnation and this life, sort of this time in between lives when we're planning our next life, it's kind of like, why would I plan that? Or does that take away my free will if this thing is planned? And so there's kind of a lot of things to talk about, and maybe some misconceptions that hopefully, from what we kind of think, we might be able to clear up. Not that we're the final word on anything, but just from our own experiences, from the readings that we do, from the people that we talk to, from the things we've read, I think we both kind of come to some ideas about free will and how it works.
Right.
So maybe a good way to come at this, Kim, would be to start talking about the idea of reincarnation, of coming into a life, and what we do or don't plan, what we do or don't know about coming into a life, and how free will plays into that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What's your kind of idea on that take on sort of planning as we come into a life, especially like choosing difficult circumstances, choosing our parents? I mean, are we denying our own free will when we sort of come into some of these very difficult circumstances?
I think I've kind of come to think of this like the planning stage, like before you come, and you kind of come in with all of these things you want to learn and experience. And what I think is that there are many ways this can happen. It's not just one way. It's a lot of things. If you want to learn about loving yourself, you might have lots of different scenarios that can take place, but there might be kind of themes that enter. And I know one of my themes was learning how to stand up for myself and respect myself. And so I would constantly come across people that were try to dominate me or try to tell me what to do and try to be more, those kind of more bossy personalities and stuff. And I found myself having to constantly come to a point where I stood up for myself. So that was like one of my themes. And I think it's kind of, when we plan, I think it's a little more like that, where there are lots of ways it can happen. And I think one of the best descriptions of free will is from Brian Weiss, who says that the event or the person can be the destiny, but your reaction to it, your response to it, is free will. So you could set up a scenario where you meet a certain person, but it's still going to be your free will whether you accept or reject that person into your life at that time, because you have constant free will when you're here. And that's also why you need to invite your guides to help you, invite your guides to show you, because they can't just start moving you like a puppet on a string. What would be the point of that? So, but that's one of the best descriptions I've ever heard of free will.
That is a really good description. And I think the whole idea of us accepting and very willingly understanding and accepting that everybody has their free will.
Yes.
We wouldn't deny that to anybody, just as we wouldn't want our free will denied. So things are very malleable. That's why, as you said, and a lot of times, very many times, people ask me in readings, what is my purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a kind of to me, it feels almost like a little bit of a backward, um, sort of a backdoor way of looking at it, because I feel like, just like you said, there are things that you want to work on, maybe goals, maybe things you want to accomplish, but your purpose is what you want it to be. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? That's, you get to decide that. It's not decided for you, and it's not set in stone, because we have free will and we change, and the world changes. We may come in thinking, there are a lot of possibilities and a lot of probabilities, and they shift. And so, we may, and it may change throughout your lifetime. Your purpose at one point may be to be the best parent that you can be, and later it may be to be the best, gardener that you can be. I mean, it shifts through your lifetime. So these things, as you said, that are these themes in our lives that we learn and grow through, they are very much compatible with our own free will and other people's free will, because we can still, like you said, like Brian Weiss said, it's all about our reaction to them. It's all about how we respond to things. And I feel like I remember one time, a friend from church, when I was still going to church, we were talking about, I think we were talking about Judas. And somebody was saying, I don't, and it might have been me, but like it felt like a setup. Like he was set, like how could he escape? It was a setup, that he like had all these sins because he did this thing. But like if God knew his personality, why would you put him in that scenario where he's condemned for all time? Religion going on there. Right. But this friend of mine said to me, but there's always another way. But that's what I believe. There's always another way. Right. And I've said that to people many times in readings, because I think it's something ingrained that my guides can work with in explaining things to people, that there's always another way. If that's your response. Right. So things can be difficult, things can look like they're going one way, but there's always another way, and that's what free will really is. And I don't know if you've noticed, I'm sure that you have, just over the course of the Trump administration, but certainly during this time of lockdown and everything, when you feel energy shift. Mm-hmm. And or in reading sometimes with people that I've read for years, it felt like something was coming and then it would shift. Yes. And it's like, that's free will kicking in. Yes. Somebody or groups of people have done something. Yeah. And I had that feeling with the Mueller report. I felt one way about it for such a long time, and then when it was due to come out, I woke up like that day and knew something had changed. I could see the three of them, Mueller, Barr, and Rosenstein. Now we know so much Rosenstein. Now we know so much more about what went on with the three of them. But I was seeing the three of them together, and something had changed. Something was different. Something was not the way that it had been going along, or at least the way the energy was kind of moving it. Something had changed. It was Barr's big fat face getting involved. but it is, you can feel those shifts. And I think you said you had a big one recently where you felt like something had changed with the virus. And I think I felt like it was the lack of response that got to a certain point where it was affected many other things. Like there was all of these chances to go differently, and then nobody made those correct choices. And so, because I kept telling people for a long time, and like readings and stuff, it feels like August, like things are going to lighten up in August. Things are going to start to get, not like a vaccine, but things will start to get better in August. And somewhere around like the 4th of July, it was right around the 4th of July, I felt like, oh, whew, everything just changed.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even feel for a while when it would be. Now I'm starting to feel more like the spring.
Mm-hmm.
But it just felt like there was no, there wasn't a good answer.
Right.
And you know that's free will. I mean, that's the good news and the bad news.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's why when I would see Trump, like, and I know other psychics too have been like, you know, he could leave this month, and it's because you see the opportunity. How many opportunities have the Republicans been able to see who this man is, and they could have use their free will to make a decision to get rid of him, or use their free will to change his behavior, or gang up on him and say, you know, you're going to do this. There's so many opportunities, and I think as intuitives, you can see like this is coming. What's going to happen? You know, are they going to use this as the opportunity? And with the impeachment, it was an opportunity. That was the opportunity, and it was so by the, you know, by whatever cosmic, you know, chance, it was so perfect because it was right before all of this stuff with the pandemic. It could have saved so many lives, could have saved so much heartache, and yet it was their free will that stopped him from going at that time. Yeah. And you know, and there were people like Mitt Romney who, you know, he found a way to use his free will differently, but that was an opportunity, and they didn't take it, and that can be so as a intuitive, that's really frustrating, and it can frustrate other people because you can see this opening. I saw it again right before this stuff about the stuff he said about the military broke, because I thought this was another opportunity. I knew there was going to be another opportunity for him to go, and I think there will be more. I think because this stuff's not going to stop coming out, because it's almost like you can feel the people using their free will. Yes. And it makes me think that people really are sort of mulling this over, you know, really making these decisions. Otherwise, if it was cut and dry that they weren't going to make, you know, we're all in on Trump, right? You know, then I don't think you would feel that way. Right. But when you have these times of feeling like, oh, there's this opportunity, it could go this, it's like, their minds are still, you know, trying to decide, and then at some point the decision is made, and it can go, you know, one way or the other, and then we are left to deal with it in the way that you said. You know, how do we react to this, and especially how do we react to it in our lives, you know, in our homes. Mm-hmm. You know, because that's our free will. Right. Now, it's interesting, and this is just to bring this up, because I personally don't know why this is, but the reason my channel even exists is because I kept being told Trump's going to go. So that seems to be at some point set in stone, that he's kind of because he is to me, he's almost like his downfall, and kind of that it's almost like it signifies a huge shift and a huge change that's going to be happening. It's almost like he's the symbol of this, because everything is going to be so different when he's gone. It feels like it is like letting the sunshine in again. So, and I've always seen it the same way, in that it's this kind of everything coming at him at once. He can't, at some point, he can't stave off everything. It's just, it's going to take him down. So what do you think that is? What do you think that, because that is clearly, at some point, he's going to go. And that is set in stone. To me, that seems like it's going to happen. I always think, I think one of the things that helps me sort of try to kind of understand that is this idea of probabilities. Right. Like we can, and especially on like our guides level, where they have the greater perspective, you know, in so many ways, they can
can see these things coming together, right?
Right.
All of these different things coming together. And of course, they're individually trying to influence people and so forth. But to me, I listen to you all the time because it's calming, just like all of your viewers say. But it makes me nervous. I haven't done a lot of them, but just like the video that I just posted, to actually do a reading on it, because I don't want to hear if it's changed, right? So, but when I did this last reading on it, it was just like you said. It just felt like he's going to go. And one of the things that I felt, and I said this earlier in the summer when I talked about how chaotic the summer was going to be, was that so many things were going to come out. And it's not just him. It's all of his minions that have enabled this. So many things that were going to come out that it would just be, for the majority, even the vast majority of people, undeniable.
Right.
That it was bad, that he was criminal, that he was really awful.
Right.
Even people who are like, oh, he can do dumb things, wouldn't be able to maybe grasp the sort of how venal he is, and some of the things that have gone on. And so that feels like a coming together that is recognizable from like the other side, and from a lot of like psychics and spiritual workers, and probably just people living their lives who are sort of spiritually in tune, can feel that sort of coming together. I don't think that means that it is set in stone.
Right.
I think it's just an overwhelming
probability. Well, and I also think about, I had talked about this lecture that I had watched from by Dolores Cannon, and one thing she says, which I thought was very interesting, is she said, this is a planet of free will. The Earth is a place of free will. That's why it's hard, but that's also why people come, because it's a very interesting way to learn, and it's a very fast way to learn.
Right.
And but she said there's only one exception in free will, and that is if we're going to destroy ourselves or destroy the planet. That's when our free will can be kind of overruled. Right. And she talked about different points in history where that was actually overruled, and one was during World War II, when the atomic bomb and all that, all of that kind of unfolded. There was a real shift, because there was, and I feel it again, like I talk about like spirit energy kind of entering. It feels like, and I do think it has to do with global warming and the planet. And
that's interesting. That makes sense, and also that could be why you're feeling that, where it feels like it's set in stone, because maybe we're at that. That's scary to think that we're at that much of a tipping point. But the information that just came out with Bob Woodward, with Trump saying, "Oh, we were almost in a nuclear war in 2007." Right, right. What? Right. So maybe we are closer to that tipping point where spirit energy, that God force, does have to step in and say, wait a minute, we need to keep this going. So.
I also think there's something, and this was something I haven't heard, but something that I have gotten messages about that I don't, fully understand, but there's something about too the protection of the United States, because it is the actual our document, what is it called? The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Yeah, that it is it's based in free will. It's based in the voting, choosing our leaders, and that kind of thing. That there is something about that is kind of spiritually. It was spiritually inspired, and it's also spiritually kind of protected. And so I do wonder if that is kind of something that's happening now too, that we're having to be kind of protecting the United States, so that the world doesn't just kind of fall into all of these just oligarchs and those kinds of authoritarianism and stuff, that it needs to that also kind of needs to be preserved in a way, because I do think that when they cheat in like Trump's trying to do now, a lot of things are falling flat. And I had talked about, I felt this time that there were actually private companies getting involved. And we just saw, like, Microsoft came out with saying, and so I do feel like a lot of things are being hit as they come in. But I do think that when you mess with people's votes, you're messing with their free will. So that is a spiritual principle. And so I do feel like there is something that spirit is here to kind of try to protect. Because I feel like a lot of the things they're going to do are just going to be, it's just going to fall flat. It's not going to work. It's going to be kind of, it's not going to make a difference, those kinds of things, rather than like 2016.
It does make sense. And I know some people have talked about, sort of experts in this kind of people and stuff, have talked about the idea of normalcy bias. Like, we just think things are going to go back to normal because they always have.
Right.
But I'm like you in that there feels to be, I guess it's a spiritual push, is like you say, that there's this, it just feels like a rising, like people rising. And I think it's very much backed by the universe. And there's this rising that doesn't let this happen.
Right.
This sort of takeover happen. And, when you say that about, like, the Constitution, just the things that have happened in the United States, particularly like in the Revolutionary War and stuff, that there's like no way that we should have pulled that one out, or even World War II.
Right.
There's so many things that fell into place in the most kind of miraculous ways.
Right.
And it does feel like when we are so determined and so emotional, this is that feeling things again, when you feel it so strongly that this is something worth preserving and something that needs to be preserved, I think that it gathers that energy, and it's backed by the universe, by our guides, however you want to think of it, the God source, the all that is, it's backed by that, because it's this moving toward higher energy and toward that higher vibration, that we all strive for, which is love, which I always say, the basis of the universe is love, and that's what you're moving toward when you're moving toward respecting free will, respecting people, respecting the planet, honoring all these things, and moving away from this very difficult and negative energy.
And I think, I don't know what reading it was in, but I think it was the Martin Luther King one, but he talks about love as well. And he said that it was, that what that actually is, because when you say love, people can, love, there's romance, love, but it's that soul recognition. You're the soul in you, recognizing the soul in another. That's what, that connectedness, that connection you feel, that kind of deeper connection that you feel, that it's beyond this physical stuff. It's a deep soul connection. Yes. Yeah. And that's what that is. And when you have that and you recognize that, you can't hurt someone else. You can't, because you've recognized that, you realize that's, and yeah, that's what that is that soul recognition of the soul in another.
Right.
That's, it's.
And I think along those same lines, when you talk about because Jacob's Journal's material always talks about this, and it took me a long time to figure, and I'm still working on it, obviously, but to sort of understand kind of where this is coming from, the idea of the basis of the universe being love. Mm-hmm. I kind of think, and this goes along with that what it's talking about is balance, which is justice and mercy combined.
Right.
And that's what the universe always seeks, is this kind of balance that really is justice. And really, when you think of that, like true justice, not sort of, what my concept of justice is, or retribution or something. When you think of that, that is what love is. It's this balance
Right.
in our lives. And, when we deal with people, if we have that sort of, like you said, that balanced perspective of being sort of one and everything, that's really what love is. It's
Right.
like acceptance without judgment, right?
Right.
That's the basis of the universe. But that's why we have free will. Really.
Right.
It's because we have to understand what that balance is. We have to understand what balance is, right? And sort of work it out in our learning until we get to that point where not only are we balanced, but we understand that it behooves us to allow everybody to find that in themselves.
And, going along with that, I was just thinking that, another thing that I think that must be a part of the spiritual principle of free will is consequence. And I think that's where Trump is going to fall down, because there is something about, I think that's what free will is teaching us, is about if you do this, this is what happens. If you do this, this is what happens. And then how you deal with the consequences as well, how you deal with the fallout and making better decisions, because you don't want that consequence, or you see kind of the ripple effect of every decision that you make. That's part of the free will experience. And so I think with someone like Trump or Barr, their actions just take out any spiritual aspect at all. An action has a consequence, and so they're going to suffer the consequences, and at some level have to take responsibility somehow. Trump has avoided responsibility in many ways, but you can't really outrun that.
No, you can't. And those consequences really are sort of an earthly form of karma.
Yes.
That's the natural sort of byproduct of the choices that you make, are
right.
consequences for better or worse.
Right.
And you have to deal with it. It has to be dealt with.
It has to be dealt. Yeah. And even it was interesting. I did a reading, the most recent one I did with Fred Sr., the dad, was so interesting because he explained how you don't escape anything, that you really do have to face and deal with what you did in your life. You don't escape it. And so I know that's little comfort, because we want to see him be in jail. We want to see him, we want to see the process. But it is true that when they pass away, and Nixon, when I did the thing with Nixon, he said the same thing. You don't escape anything. You still have to work through it. Mm-hmm. And it's still a very painful process, because you have to experience
you understand
the fallout. You understand it. And he talks about at one point it was quite emotional that he stayed like in the dark and with his head down and just like sat in the dark and was just there by himself, because he was so overwhelmed with the guilt and shame and all of these things that he didn't feel in his life. But now that he was back to kind of like, what did I do? What did I just do with my life? Oh my, how many people did, it was like that kind of realization.
Yes.
And he explained, like his guys were around him. Like, it's almost like they're in support of him, but he had to go through it because he realized what he just screwed up his life.
I think in the last Jacob's Journal thing, they said something like that. My Jacob's Guide said something about that, and they said that something about having to face it when you in the next world, but they were there, but never in judgment.
Right.
Always
exactly.
in support.
Exactly.
The judgment comes from us, understanding what we've done, and I think that the biggest thing is understanding how others have suffered because of you, or the feelings that they've had to feel because of something that you did. And imagine that on a mass scale, like, Nixon or, Hitler or somebody like that. I mean, I can't even, I don't know.
Well, there's a, if you watch the afterlife interviews that it's Emma McIntosh does.
Yes.
She did one on Henry VIII,
Oh,
and
uh-huh.
he was still feeling the effects of that lifetime. He had never come back since then because he was still dealing with the fallout from that lifetime and trying to deal with it and trying to work through it and coming to terms with it. And it's almost like he didn't want to come back yet because it was so massive, the scale that he had hurt and the massive scale that he had affected the world and affected everything. He wouldn't allow himself to come back until he figured it all, wiped it clean, made sure he worked through all of it. So that's how massive the fallout can be when it's a big scale like that, when it's so big. If I just believe it. So, but I know for other people it sounds weird, it's like afterlife interview, but it is, that it does explain a lot of those things. So.
Yes. And I think that sometimes that can be just, I think of things that I've done in my own life that I think, ooh, I probably, hurt somebody or, and I kind of don't want to, in the next, in the afterlife, have to actually experience what those people went through. But I know I will. I mean, but there's got to be no more inclusive and extensive form of judgment than judging yourself or experiencing and it's not even there's got to be a different word than judgment, but it's just that kind of really it's how you use your free will, and for better or worse, and having to deal with the ways in which you used it. So it's not this idea of judgment being cast upon you by others. It's understanding how you lived your life with the opportunities that you had.
Exactly. So, and
we're all going to go through that. I mean, we're all doing the best that we can do, and we're not, none of us are perfect, obviously. So there's, and it's a learning experience, it's very experience.
It is, and I think the best thing that you can do is here when you're here is like when I talked about on my last video is get rid of any grievances you have, forgive people, let go anything you're holding on to yourself, because it's so much. You really can get rid of it here. There, I felt like. Just from the Nixon thing, it almost feels like it's harder there in a way.
You're right.
And if you unload it here, where it is kind of like you're in this environment, so it all kind of, like you said, there's a balancing act that's trying to take place here, and when you take part in that and you try to make that happen, it means so much more than when you're back there and you have all this perspective. It's like you can let go of it here. There, it's just not as easy.
It's something about dealing with the physical in the physical.
Yes.
That is easier and makes much more sense. And
exactly.
Exactly. So.
Oh well.
Well.
I think it's an interesting subject, and I hope people have a better understanding of it. I think even we are kind of like trying to figure out exactly how it works and in all the different ways it works, and it can be very confusing, but I think if you boil it down to your own life, your own decisions, the way that
as always,
exactly, start there. Don't worry about Donald Trump's free will. That is a whole other thing.
We don't want to
be part of it. I was going to say, there's no amount of money or power that I would trade for that guy. None.
I'll deal with my problems. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, good. Thanks, Kris.
Thank you. And people can watch your videos, find out about your classes. Intuitiview is your channel. Intuitiview.com is your website. I'm at Cardvoyant Kris on YouTube and cardvoyant.com on the interwebs. So I noticed Lucy came up behind you and kind of made herself comfortable.
She did. She's not feeling very well, so I want to ask all the remote healers to work on Lucy because she hasn't been feeling very well. I think it is something to do with the smoke and stuff. I think maybe she's just kind of felt kind of blah. We all have. So and she's so little with little tiny lungs and stuff. So I can imagine, you know.
Poor tiny.
But yeah, so we're gonna, if she doesn't improve over the weekend, we're taking her back to the vet on Monday. So we'll get to the bottom of it. But
we hope she feels better.
I do too. She's also an old lady, so she knows she has little aches and pains here.
I know that feeling.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Betty, and until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and bye for now.